Greetings, folks. Welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series. Today's session is about writing analytics to improve formative feedback. And we have a great cast of presenters today: Simon Buckingham Shum, Simon Knight, Andrew Gibson, Philippa Ryan, and Adam Aitken, all from the University of Technology in Sydney. So whoever the first presenter is, I think it's Simon. Would you like to begin, please? Just press the talk button and you'll be able to start.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's great to have the chance to share what we've been doing for the last 2 years or so here at UTS. So let me just introduce the team to you here, because our approach to designing learning analytics brings together quite a range of expertise. We have computational experts, in this case in text analytics, because we're talking about writing. So we have Simon and Andrew. We have learning designers, which is really all of us in different respects. We have user interface designers who are concerned about the actual experience that the learner or the educator will have with the application tool. We have academic learning and literacy expertise, which is Adam today. And this team provides linguistics and pedagogical insight specific to the discipline that we are talking about. And of course, we have the academics themselves, who are the brave people piloting this new breed of tool with their students. And today we have Pip Ryan, who will be able to answer your questions about her experience of using the analytics tool with her civil law students. A brief word about the Connected Intelligence Center. This is an innovation center at UTS to advance the use of data and analytics at the university. This was envisioned originally by our DVC for Education, Shirley Alexander, in partnership with our DVC research at the time, Attila Bronx, who's now our VC. And after university-wide consultation for several years on the importance of how the university should harness the data science revolution, KIC was launched in 2014. Now, our specific interest at KIC is in the potential of learning analytics to build the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that students need for lifelong learning, arc of life learning. In other words, we might talk about the transferable graduate attributes, such as collaboration, resilience, agency, the ability to engage in critical argument, metacognition, or reflective practice. So when designing any learning analytics tool, the central question is, how are the qualities that we care about displayed in students' activity? And does that activity leave traces that a computer could detect? And not only detect, of course, but feedback in a useful form to learners and educators. Because if the big data revolution is about anything, about improving the feedback loops in complex systems to enable the people to adjust accordingly. So today, of course, our focus is on the potential of writing. Writing as a window onto the learner's capacities for critical argument, metacognition, and reflective practice. And we're going to jump into a couple of different examples. But before we do that, let me just say a little bit about what you can see on the slide there. So we are concerned with students, educators, researchers, and leaders in the university. We are interested in how we teach data science. We have a Master of Data Science and Innovation, which is the only master's degree in data science that we know about that explicitly attends to innovation and creative intelligence, as well as machine algorithmic intelligence. We design what we hope will be practical, usable tools for the university. We do this as researchers, so we are evaluating them and, of course, disseminating what we're learning within the university, as well as in the usual kinds of conferences where learning analytics people share their work. And we're particularly interested in how we can shape the debate and perhaps change the conversation a little bit about what's going on with big data in education, which in some quarters gets a rather bad press as something that just dumbs down learning, is, sort of technocentric people trying to count the easy things that computers can count. and not really doing justice to what we really think a higher education is about. Well, we hope that what you see today will cause you to question that argument, if that was worrying you. And we take what we hope is a human-centered approach to analytics in society more broadly. It's hard to avoid news stories now about algorithms and how they pervade our lives. And we're very interested in what it means for algorithms to be accountable and transparent. And we'd ask that question about the tools we develop for universities as well. How easy is it to ask, why is it doing this? How is it making that decision? And what would it mean to give a sensible answer to a student or to an academic or to a researcher who was asking that question of either a research prototype, which is what you'll be seeing today, or indeed a product, because the vendors are banging on your door and offering to sell you some very dazzling dashboards. A final note before we jump in, and that is that we're thinking a lot about learning analytics, not just as an exciting technology, but we want to place learning analytics within the context of the, I suppose we might call it the educational holy trinity. Epistemology, assessment, pedagogy, they've been around for a long time, of course. And they provide a boundary, a set of boundaries that we find helpful for aligning analytics. So very practically, what kinds of learner activity do your learning analytics value by tracking? And by extension, what do we not value? So what is the point of deploying a learning analytics tool if it doesn't fit into the pedagogy that you care about, or if the feedback that this analytics tool is providing doesn't align with the assessment criteria? The analytics tool becomes something of a sideshow and an irrelevance. The students need to know that the analytics tool is attending to the qualities that you have declared to be important in the assessment rubric. So we might also say, well, who gets to see the analytics? Are these analytics just for educators to track students in higher and higher resolution? Or are we interested in analytics that actually feed back to learners how they're going? And depending on your pedagogical approach, you may not wish students to see analytics. And if we are going to show students analytics, at what resolution? Do they just do their own work and the feedback on that? Do they get some indication of how the whole group is performing? Again, these are pedagogical and assessment decisions to make. Now, before we dive into the writing analytics details with my colleagues, I'll just pause there for a moment in case anybody has any questions about what I've just said, about the context in which we're working, or the approach we take to analytics, especially for lifelong learning competencies and graduate attributes. Any quick questions? Nobody right now? Okay, we can always come back to this later on. In that case, let's move on to writing analytics as an example of our approach to learning analytics. And I'm going to hand over to the team who've been working on reflective writing, and we'll then move on to what we call analytical academic writing. So, handing over now to Adam.
Thanks, Simon. Adam Aitken here. I'm going to just talk about writing analytics in the reflective academic writing space. And you see in our bracket that we've got engineering and pharmacy. We also have been working with business on trying to develop an application, which we call AWA, trying to develop an application that students can use to check their reflective writing drafts. And what's very interesting, and hopefully people will start to think about, is the differences and similarities between reflective writing and reflective writing assessments between different faculties. Our partner academics were very generous in participating with us by giving us corpuses or data sets of student reflections, which were then passed through ethics. We had ethics clearance to anonymize them, and some of these texts were used for language analysis. That was really my job and my colleague in France, Agnes Sandor. And the basis of our language analysis was to get insights into what features or aspects of reflective writing were salient and what features could be used to design a computational system. So I'll just go on to show the next slide. So what was our need? Our motivation for this is to create an application that gives timely feedback at scale. And by timely, we mean almost instantaneous, within a few seconds, from a student uploading a text to some kind of feedback appearing in the application. So we wanted to also not only provide feedback in different forms, but to really to research what feedback was very actionable. Our real aim was for the application to stimulate students to actually redraft their texts after they'd seen their feedback. The slide here shows, it's sort of graphic, that shows one of the themes. How do we go from a human style markup of text, which I'm sure if you've all been students, you've received assessments from your lecturers with almost illegible comments on them. We've all struggled with human feedback on our writing. The second box is our tagged sentences. This is what we came up with this year. What happens when a student puts text to our is it will come back to them with features of their writing annotated with this shape. So green triangle, the blue square, and there's another one which I haven't shown. The bolded sentence signifies particularly salient or significant expression of reflection. One of the themes we've been grappling with is how much feedback we should visualize, how to visualize the feedback, what aspects of a text should the machine ignore, how do we separate important annotation from just noise. This, I'll go a bit more deeply into the idea of the definitions, working definitions of reflective writing. And really we're limiting ourselves to reflective writing in the academic context, and research is often referred to critical reflective writing or academic reflective writing, which is a bit more important for us in the tertiary context. Some of the very important aspects of reflective writing are that distinguish it from other kinds of academic writing is that people are expected to disclose their strengths and weaknesses and their feelings and their attitudes and evaluations of all sorts of things in reflective writing. In my analysis of reflective writing texts, this kind of self-disclosure can be quite, let's say, affective for me to read. It's like when a writer is being very open. Many other students really don't like to do that. So it's a challenge for them just to be assessed on reflective writing when they don't really want to address themselves. Unlike normal academic writing, reflective writing uses certain rhetorical features, or what we've come to call moves or expressions of intention. So what a writer wants to do might be reveal self-critical points, so be reflexive and personal, but also to record their feelings. So when we talk about affect, we're talking about not just raw feelings, but considered feelings, judgmental feelings, positive and negative feelings. The second point is that reflective writing focuses on analysis, and this is sometimes lost, that in academic reflective writing, the writer has a purpose to analyse their own learning problems, their own learning challenges, or to start to think or reflect on whether they've learnt anything from their learning experience. The third point that's important, that we find very important, is that reflective writing needs to contain evidence. In a sense, there's a reflective writing in academia needs to justify, firstly, that the student really did learn something, and secondly, that the student intends to use that experience in learning to change their way of thinking or their actions or their practice in the future. So we've tried to capture these sorts of features in, and I'm going to the right of the slide, in a writing framework, and I'll just go to the bottom of it. We see reflective writing as basically a kind of narrative kind of writing. It's a narrative of learning experience, and it's very much focused on self and self-evaluation. Self-evaluation in the context, and I'm going up to the next part, the external context could be a work placement, or it could be an experience of doing research with peers. The next, going up to challenge, as I said, reflective writing records challenging, difficult learning experiences, and the challenges could be ones that come from the student's own feelings of inadequacy, or their own what they know already might not be enough to achieve what they're being asked to do. The other challenges are always can be external. So when a student is reflecting on how they worked with colleagues in a team, they might want to reveal what they felt about working collaboratively. The third one at top is that stage in writing where you reflect on personal change, and the theory suggests that good reflective writing or deep reflective writing contains evidence that people can reimagine the future. They can speculate on what they might be doing better in the future, or they can reimagine themselves and their professional identity in the context of a profession. So, apprentice, a law student begins to see themselves as a lawyer with capacity. And so we want to get in our model a sense of depth, and depth is a very difficult thing for computers to see. But so I'll leave that for later discussion, what depth is. I'll quickly go to just some technical details. So we analysed language with our partner Agnes Sundor, who is a computational linguist, and we started last year. We based our work on trying to find types of reflection and the kinds of rhetorical things that happen in reflective language. So, for example, the shift in someone's perception, where they change their view of life, their view of themselves. We can indicate that in writing when we use expressions like I began to understand, I could see, I realized, I recognized. And we can find these in sentence examples. So my example, however, contrary to my preconceptions, the class was an eye-opening experience in which I was able to connect with other first-year freshmen, etc. We went from that level of, collecting a rubric of language items and collecting sentences to the design of rules called concept dependencies, and these were used by Agnes in her Xerox incremental parser. It's a natural language processing engine, and in order for this machine to parse and to annotate text, it needs to be programmed with rules. So in this example, we have items like we tag words that indicate an author. An author in yellow is indicated in the output by my. An item of reflection is indicated in blue by lexical choices like preconception. We also add in another very important aspect of reflective expression, which is the contrast. When someone shifts in thinking, they're probably going to use words like before, however, now, contrary to my preconceptions. Just very quickly, this year Agnes developed these concept rules and drilled down into rhetorical moves. We've selected three rhetorical moves: chain, context, change, and challenge. This is just an example of how the machine would pass this sentence. In the future, it would be beneficial for me to sit with them and take notes. So Xerox, the zip parser, is able to identify where this author lies with the subject, the author's evaluation or attitude to something, the stance in orange. There is an indication of shift in thinking from past to future, so it indicates consideration of future change in the future, tagged as future temp. And links. Links are important because we want to look at how writers connect their feelings and thinking with other kinds of statements. Oops. Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Andrew Gibson now, who will talk more about the computational side of it.
Thanks, Adam. Before I move further, is there any questions for Adam? I could pause a moment in case people have specific questions about the language analysis aspect. Don't see any popping up just yet, so we'll keep moving, and certainly if you have any questions for Adam, feel free to type them into chat box and we can take them at the end. Part of my role with the reflective writing analytics that we did here was to bring the analytics aspects into this. So we examine the reflective writing from a linguistic point of view, and then we need to be able to say, well, how can we deal with this sort of analysis computationally? But in actual fact, it's a two-way street. We not only want to take the analysis and deal with that computationally, but we also want to understand where we're heading, that we're trying to provide actionable feedback to students. So we're actually trying to provide the students with something that's going to result in them doing something that will benefit their learning. And that's quite different than just taking the analytics directly and presenting it straight to the students. So it's one thing to analyze something and then just display that. It's another thing to sort of say, well, what Adam alluded to this before. How do we make choices about what do we show? Do we hide certain things? How do we select what's important? Or perhaps there's more complex types of feedback that we need to build from more fundamental analytics. So one of the things we did, which I'm going to talk briefly about here, we're not going to cover everything, obviously, is build on what Adam and Agnes had done with linguistic analysis, and then we try and make sense of that into the computational world. If you take a look at the bottom right of your screen, we have the key that is displayed to the students about the annotations in their writing. The blue square, the pink circle, and the green triangle that Adam mentioned before. But part of our decision making is what do those mean to the students? And once again, we're trying to think about these things in terms of how it might provoke the students to take some sort of action. So, for example, the challenge of new and surprising or unfamiliar ideas, problems, or learning experiences, indications of that in the text that would sort of say they're identifying some sort of challenge as part of what they're writing about, as part of what we're reflecting about. When we detect those through the various detections of words and structures of the sentence, syntactic patterns, we pull that together into, the top right of the screen there is just a sort of a computer representation that we have some sort of annotation, which is then added to the text. So on line 2 at the beginning of 289th character or whatever, this is where we've found this particular challenge aspect, and then that gets rendered in the user interface. So this is kind of a generic pattern that then gets applied to a whole bunch of different analytics, and then those analytics are displayed to the user, and there's decisions that are made about the user interface about how this might work for the user, how would the student respond to this. And that comes down to, one of the discussions we had at this point was things like, for example, the blue square initially was called context, and we initially had the word annotated into the sentence. And then we discovered that because of the sort of vagueness of or the ambiguity around the word context, that it's really problematic in terms of what the student could do with that or use with that. And so by going away from the word and picking an icon and attributing it to a sort of a sentence level description, it helped overcome that ambiguity. We backed that up with documentation and additional guide information which explains this in much more depth. And as Simon mentioned at the beginning, part of the purpose of what we're doing is to have some sort of integrity about the algorithms and to make a level of transparency there. So part of this is explaining to the students, this is what we're doing and this is how we're coming up with this, and this is, what we're hoping to be helpful for. So because our objective is for the students to be able to use this, then our evaluation of the software is not so much in the accuracy or measuring the actual computational analytics, but it's like, how did the students find it? How did they respond to what we gave them? So our system also includes a way of capturing responses for students, and that's our prime measure of evaluation for this particular project. And we found, so far, it's an ongoing project as data is still coming in, but so far we've had a mixed feedback. Some of us sort of, drawing attention to the fact that the emotional aspect, as Adam mentioned, that's difficult for a lot of students, and so drawing attention to that in the text is helpful for them. Some of them are lots of them are obviously particularly interested in what a tutor or a lecturer might mark them on, and so drawing them their attention to features that might be in their subject rubric is helpful to them. The instantaneous nature of the feedback obviously is a plus as well. We also had negative feedback, and the negative feedback tended to focus around two things that are of ongoing concern to us in terms of improving the product. One is it's very difficult to get a general tool that works for everybody. So this variability between disciplines is a significant issue, and therefore students responded that they wanted more specific feedback and feedback that was tailored to their specific subject rather than just general feedback on reflection. Some students also noted that the feedback appeared to lack context. When we're delivering feedback on sentences or even paragraphs, that feedback doesn't necessarily encompass a knowledge of the whole document or other things that have gone on, which is obviously very difficult for the computer to do. And the students noticed that. So, those kinds of challenges present us with opportunities for exploring in future research work. But the key aspect for us is how to... Sorry. We just had an audio issue at this end. The key aspect for us is how to do this in a way that develops a tool to give the students the actionable feedback. So How specialized do we make the software is a key question. Can we bring this context into it? How would we go about doing that? Can we, for example, deliver feedback at a paragraph level that takes into account the whole, the other feedback that might be delivered on the document or specific details that are in the sentences? We're also interested in things like what kinds of feedback might help the students, encourage the students to write multiple drafts. That's a common requirement from academics in terms of helping their students. They know that those that do write drafts it tends to help the writing. How do we encourage students to do that? How do we provide a tool where they go, okay, this was easy, I could get feedback nice and quickly, and it helped me know what to change, therefore I'll have another go, I'll write another version, and not just submit it to AWA sort of 5 minutes before they submit it to Blackboard for assessment. I'm going to hand over now to Pip Ryan, who is going to introduce the work of writing analytics that they did with the law students. Thanks, Pip.
Guys, Pip is not coming through at all.
Okay, I think I'm back on. Can everybody hear me? Simon, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah, Pip, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll just go back to what I was saying, which is that I teach a subject called civil practice, which is a compulsory law subject in most common law countries, and Australia is no exception. So this subject has every single student comes through it, and halfway through they do an essay. It's a semester-long subject. The essay is 2,000 words. And what we had noticed a couple of years ago when I started assessing these essays was that there was a misalignment between their expectations in relation to their results and the actual paper as it was assessed by the tutors. So this is a really important exercise because students who are studying law are taught it in a way that we expect them to then enter the profession. Not all will, but if they are going to go on to become lawyers, being able to write is a key skill. This is because not only do lawyers prepare correspondence for court and also for their clients, but they also need to be able to prepare written correspondence for the purposes of making submissions and preparing arguments and cross-examination. This is more so moving forward as the law is becoming more and more driven online, and courts require documents submitted in electronic form. So they need to be able to write well, and so this is a tool of the trade, and we're trying to ensure that they leave this degree with it well practiced, rehearsed and assessed. So the disconnect that occurs with the way that the students assess their own work is that in particular we found with the students achieving a high pass or a low credit, there was the largest gap between their expectation for their results
Hi, Pip. Sorry, we've lost your sound there, so can you rejig whatever you just did? Hi, who is in the room with Pip there? I know she's sharing one of the headsets with someone. It was either Adam or Andrew.
Can you hear now?
Hi. Yeah. Okay, you're back again.
You're back? Okay.
Yeah. So if you need someone to move the slides forward, just give a yell out, and I can do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just say next slide, please, and I'll do it.
Okay, cheers. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so what I was saying was that the biggest misalignment between what the students are achieving in their essays and what they expected to achieve occurs with the students who are getting a high pass or a low credit for their results. And so their frustration was leading to a lot of feedback from them saying they didn't understand what the problem was. So when we showed them the marking criteria feedback sheet that was provided to them at the beginning of the semester for these essays that they were writing, they would then, for the first time, this is in our experience after interviewing these students, they would for the first time really think about what was expected, even though they're very self-driven, very competitive students. This particular group, the high pass, low credit ones, were really not engaging with what was expected in relation to these essays. So what we've done is provided these very carefully structured feedback sheets and introduced a self-assessment process where we asked them to self-assess against each of these criteria, how they felt that they had gone with the essays, and then we checked those against the marks being given by the tutors. Still there continued a very strong disconnection. So just looking at the slide that's headed up the motivation, you can see the third bullet point says benchmarking. There's an activity that was introduced last semester. We gave the students a series of introductions that were constructed, that were written by me. One is a pass quality, one's a distinction, and one's a high distinction. And we asked them to rate those introductions. 100% of the students were able to identify which was worth the pass, which was worth the distinction, and which was worth the high distinction. Where it became more interesting was that we had also provided to them some feedback that I had created, which is authentic feedback to those introductions at those levels, and asked them to match them up. Again, the results were not bad. They were, on the whole, quite good at working out which particular feedback matched with which introduction to the essays, but it wasn't 100%. So the reason why we did that was to see if we could ask them to look at somebody else's introductions, not just their own, have a go at imagining what the correct feedback was by matching up the feedback I'd created, and then asking them to do that to their own essays. It's really hard to quantify this, but in my view, their essays are improving in results of these exercises, but it's probably marginal at the moment. So down to the fourth bullet point on that slide that's headed up to the motivation, we come to automated writing evaluation systems. So this
looks like we lost the sound again. Can you just, Andrew, you're in the room, maybe you want to get a pick? Seems like the network connection might be dropping out.
Take over. Okay, I think I'm going to take over there because I've got another headset on. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yeah, Adam, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm Simon Knight, and Pip was just about to hand over to me in any case. We have two sets of intentions that we can run with students to get them to try and correct this misalignment between the student and instructor assessments. And the second of these, the use of the automated writing evaluation tool, or AWA. It was designed around the same sort of model as in the reflective writing tool. So we're looking for particular types of moves that occur within analytic writing, type of writing that's particularly important in legal contexts. So on the slide here, you can see examples of the sorts of moves that we're looking for and the labels that they get given. So we're looking for things like novelty, the contrasting of ideas, giving background knowledge, and highlighting novelty and so on. And what gets outputted is similar but slightly different to the reflective writing analytic tool. So we get given a highlighted text where the highlights relate to whether in the kind of mint color here, a summary statement is being given. Those are statements that relate to the overall structure of the text. They're trying to give information about what will be done within that text. Or another kind of important move, and those are marked by the subcategories here, which were flagged on the previous slide, so background, contrast, and so on. If that combination occurs, then we see that those get turned pink. So those are sentences which give some information, some summary information about what's going on in the essay in this case, along with doing some other important thing. So this example here, we have a move that's giving summary about the text. So the examples provided throughout this paper, and then we also see that there's contrast happening in that as well. So we made an alignment between the moves that were highlighted within the AWA text and a rubric that had been developed previously. And I'm actually going to pass back to Pip just very briefly to talk a bit through that.
Okay, so the rubric that we created had 10 elements to it, and 2 of them were related to the introduction, and we wanted a statement of what the students were going to actually argue, and then a statement of their essay plan. And we felt that this aligned with the summary and contrast elements of the AWA tool. The third element that falls under summary and contrast was the conclusion that we wanted from the students. So we were explicit with them that we were going to be assessing the quality of these 3 elements. This is statement of argument, the plan, and the conclusion. When it was run through AWA, they would then be able to see whether AWA picked up any of the element in their introductions and conclusions. And if, of course, there was nothing highlighted, then at best, this could, well, at worst it was cause for pause, but at best it might actually inform changes that they want to make. The importance of us addressing the introduction was that just with some quite informal statistical analysis of about 260 essays back in 2015, we were able to see there's a very strong positive correlation between the quality of the introduction to these essays and the quality of the entire essay. And we were explicit with that, with the students about that as well. And so this is a highly scaffolded exercise. The only other thing I wanted to speak to in relation to the slide that you're looking at, which is slide 22, that headed up alignment of AWE rubric, was just the identification of relevant issues. So we asked the students to identify issues that are necessary. This is a really high-level task for all lawyers. That's the most important thing for all lawyers, is identification of the issues at hand. And we were able to then align that to what AWA would tag as emphasis, again resulting in the same approach or reaction from the students when they looked at the way AWA reacted when it rendered their essays through the tool, and they could either see some highlighted text or none at all. Again, cause for pause, which is really valuable.
Okay, thanks, Pip. So just to show again, that gets rendered as on this slide. So we can see that the highlighted sentences are color-coded according to the particular type, and that they're flagged with these function keys. So then the other intervention that we were interested in was around benchmarking. So benchmarking is a task where you ask students to assess a number of texts, typically 3, that you've previously assessed. And normally you'll run a benchmarking task with a high quality or a high achieving text, and then one that's in the middle and one that's worse quality. And the purpose of this is to investigate how well the students can assess those texts in order to engage them with the assessment criteria and exemplars, the texts that they have to read, to try and draw alignment between the instructor and the student's assessment of those texts. So once the students have completed the exercise, they get to see what the tutor thought of it as well. And in fact, in the model that we use here at UTS, typically the students also get to see what the other students thought about those texts. And it provides the tutor with some diagnostic insight, so they can see where which criteria particular students are struggling with identifying, and what kinds of feedback the students give on these dummy exemplar texts. And a modification that we made to the task in our most recent research project was to ask students to engage in a benchmarking task in which we provided them with texts that were highlighted using different methods. So some students were given a version that was highlighted with AWA, with the analytic markup, so that's in the bottom left of the slide. Some students received a version of the text that was highlighted by the instructor, so by Pip, where she was highlighting things that the students had really nailed, that were really meeting the assessment criteria, so in green, versus things that could probably need some attention to meet those criteria. A blank version, which is the top right one obviously, and then a version that was highlighted with Grammarly. And the reason for doing this was we wanted to see whether or not, in fact, providing students with the AWA highlighting supported them to, one, assess those texts more accurately. So can they assign the correct grade to the correct text? And two, to give better quality feedback. So first off, by asking them to assign pre-written feedback statements to the texts, and second, by actually writing their own feedback as well. Oops. Now the analysis for that benchmarking task is still ongoing, but the purpose there is again to explore whether or not benchmarking with the addition of automated writing evaluation feedback can support students in closing that misalignment issue. So we've gathered some feedback on the use of the AWA tool with this cohort, and that's will be out in a paper very shortly. And the kinds of things that the students were saying was that they liked the fact that they could get instant feedback. Interestingly, some of them said that they actually found it better to get feedback from a computer because it wasn't embarrassing. They also liked the fact that it gave them sentence level feedback, and that it helped them to see what the structure and style that they had was. There were also some things that were pause for thought for us. So there were concerns around accuracy. That wasn't particularly surprising, given that the tool is designed to pick up on particular types of moves, but not all moves, and that it's a rule-based tool, so there are lots of different ways to express particular moves, and it's highly probable that we won't be able to capture all of those. Perhaps more concerning, though, was that there was at least one statement, and I think more than one actually, where students seemed to show a kind of false sense of security. So they would talk about the software had quite a bit to say about my lack of justification. And it's interesting because the software just says nothing about justification. It gives feedback on particular types of moves and their instantiations in the texts. So one of the things that we're now thinking about is how we can express the feedback in a way that encourages the students to push back at times and really engages them with what it's looking for. And the benchmarking task is perhaps one way that we might be able to kind of increase that analytics literacy as well. So next steps for us on the analytic parser are, as with the reflective parser, to think more about actionable feedback, and part of that is around encouraging the students to think about the purpose of this tool and other tools that they might use, the analysis of the benchmark data and the quality of the feedback being given. And we've started to do some analysis of the sequences of moves being made within the texts as well. So the samples on the side here are actually from a science, a set of science essays rather than from the legal data. But you can see that the students with the pass marks seem to have a lower diversity of moods, and the way that the moods distribute across those texts looks different as well. Now, this is very, very preliminary work, but we think the approach is likely to be promising, and we're continuing in that vein. Okay, so I am going to pause there and invite any questions. I can see that a few have come in, and I was collating a few whilst I wasn't talking. So on the question of, do you have different data sets of phrases and keywords for different disciplines? I'm sorry, I forgot to note who asked which question. The answer to that is that we're starting to build up discipline-based parsers. So in fact, the legal parser is our first one. So within the analytic parser, there is an option to filter out certain phrases that we know have particular meaning in law that isn't shared elsewhere, and to add particular keywords as well. And we're looking at how we can extend that approach within other contexts. The analysis of manual versus automated feedback on these texts, there are various different ways that we can engage with that kind of comparison. So one of them would be to ask humans, tutors or otherwise, to mark up texts according to the scheme that we're using, so the types of moves that we're looking for, and then see how accurate the parser is in detecting that. Our concern with doing that kind of work is that it may not be particularly meaningful to do it at scale in a kind of trained way. What we have been doing, and Simon in the chat there is pointing to the International Journal of Artificial Intelligence in Education. We have a paper out shortly in that discusses how we fine-tuned the legal parser. So we worked with Pip and with Agnes at Xerox in France to change the way that the parser detected particular moods, add terms and remove them, as I described before. Okay.
Hi, this is Andrew again. Just taking a couple of questions here as well. There was a question regarding the extent to which the level of a student's language or literacy proficiency impacts or interferes with the tool, from Melissa. Thanks, Melissa. That's a great question. The answer is it actually depends on how that proficiency manifests itself with the features that the computer is looking for in the text. So some of the parsing works on syntactic relationships in text and on grammatical parts of speech of the different words. Poorly constructed sentences or sentences where those patterns are sort of messed up can actually result in the computer not detecting things particularly well. But there again, there's other aspects where those patterns are relatively short, and even a student that is using poor grammar may still get the syntactic patterns correct that we're looking for, in which case the parser would still work on that language. The other thing too is that part of a big part of the parsing is sort of the detection of sort of key words, like Adam mentioned in the reflective writing. There's epistemic verbs we're interested in, like I believe or I think or those kinds of things, which means as long as those words are present in the appropriate situation, the parser will detect it, even if even if they're not used well in a writing sense. Another question was related to whether we're using a particular corpus. The answer is no, we're not. We're building Corpora from the large amount of writing that's going into the system. And in future, some of the work that we do will be based on training computational models from those documents that are part of that corpora. But a large amount of what's happening at the moment is more rule-based analysis, in which case it will work just as well on a single document as it would on multiple documents. Do we have any other questions? If not, we thank everybody for participating in the webinar and pass the mic back to Matthew. So thanks very much for having us.
Thank you, Simon and team. That's been a great webinar. As I said, we're almost at a close. It's now 7 o'clock here in Melbourne. So if you could kindly fill in the feedback survey before you go, that would be great. You are welcome to keep asking questions. I see Ron has put a question into the text chat, and looks like Adam Aitken has put a response into somebody. Now, if people would like to ask a question via the microphone, now's your chance to be a star. If you press the little hands up symbol, you'll be able to ask a question. So I'll leave it to our speakers to respond to any of the questions that might be coming through there.
I'm just going to message.
So I saw a question. I'm not sure who wants to respond, but Ron has asked a question. Have students modified their writing in response to the AWA comments on earlier drafts?
Well, everybody else has run out of the room. Andrew is literally off to catch a plane. He is exploring this issue with the reflexive writing parser, and it's something that we're preparing empirical studies for to look at in the analytic parser, both with Laura and with the other partners that we're working with. Just to say, one of the ways that we want to explore that issue is by exploring how students improve a given text. So we give them a draft of some kind, and we ask them to work with that. Does the feedback actually help them to engage with the text and engage with the feedback?
Okay, thanks for that. Looks like we're really losing people out of the room. Looks like Ron was pleased to get his response, so no worries, Ron. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to shut off the recording now. So anybody else, you're welcome to stick around for a couple of minutes, ask some last minute questions. But thank you, Simon and team. That was great.